Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's artwork presentation. I'm Neil Greenberg, professor of choreography and chair of the arts here at Lang. This is the first event of our 11th year of artwork, a lecture series which invites innovative artists to Lang to speak about their creative process. Tonight, our guest is the choreographer Reggie Wilson, artistic director of Reggie Wilson Fist and Heel Performance Group, a Brooklyn-based dance company. I first began to hear about Wilson's work sometime in the early 1990s. I remember overhearing a conversation at Dance Theater Workshop about a choreographer who was doing ethnographic research as part of his creative process, traveling in the American South and Caribbean. At that time, I knew of no contemporary dance maker who was utilizing such research, and I was intrigued. I first saw one of his pieces in 1995 at DTW, where his work was presented almost yearly in the 1990s. That 1995 presentation was a dance theater work named Black Burlesque. The first section, I remember, was set in a burlesque house with Retta Aliong, who still performs with Fist and Heel and who is here tonight. Yay! Retta was the madam of the house and the mistress of ceremonies. The second section, moving from the profane to the sacred, was set in the Fist and Heel meeting house, where the audience was witness to a prayerful ritual of song and dance. I remember especially the fervor of the performances and the variety and complexity of the rhythms. The piece concluded with dancing to disco music. I remember thinking, yes, I recognize this. Disco as an ecstatic, almost religious experience. All the elements together somehow made perfect sense. In the years since, Wilson has created scores of works that have been presented locally, nationally, and internationally. He's an artist compelled by the idea of looking toward the past to move into the future. His works fold history into the present or show how what seems new never truly is. He's known in part for redeploying the research to performance methodology that African-American choreographers Zora Neale Hurston, Katherine Dunham, and Pearl Primus innovated at mid-century. As noted by dance studies scholar Susan Manning, Wilson, unlike his mid-century predecessors, quote, does not translate his ethnographic research into theatrical spectacle. Instead, he treats his research as found movement, source material for his postmodern compositional sensibility. What results are works that challenge spectators' preconceptions about race, culture, and identity. Wilson has also pursued long-term collaborations with artists he has met through his research travel. Artists from Trinidad and Tobago, Zimbabwe, the Congo, and Senegal. In these collaborations, Wilson creates means for different traditions and practices to coexist in the same time and space. I've learned that Wilson found the name for his company in his study of the Black church in the South. In the years after the Civil War, the bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church criticized the, quote, fist and heel worship, unquote, of the shout, which was a form that Africans in the Americas had reinvented from their spiritual traditions. As noted on the company's website and programs, both Black and white authorities dismissed the soulful art form that these enslaved Africans had created when they were, quote, denied their drums, unquote. Wilson was born in Milwaukee and came to New York in 1985 to attend the dance program at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. In a recent interview, he spoke about coming of age as a dancer and choreographer in New York in the late 1980s, when a number of Black choreographers were working downtown, utilizing vastly different approaches. Their wide range of examples gave him the permission to make the work he wanted to make and, here I quote Wilson, the allowance not to have to fulfill any Black dance checklist, That's Black dance, uppercase B, uppercase D. Yet Wilson's works demonstrate that he's thought deeply about what it means for him, a Black choreographer, to put a dance on stage in contemporary times. He's noted that to him, Black is not just African American, it's the African diaspora and all the international influences upon it. In a recent issue of the prestigious TDR, the Drama Review, there's a special section on Wilson by Susan Manning. She notes that she finds it impossible to disentangle what is traditional from what is contemporary in Wilson's work, what is Africanist and what is postmodernist. Quote, what I had considered separate categories of Africanisms and postmodernisms collided, colluded, and collapsed in my viewing of his work, unquote. She sees Wilson as intentionally troubling spectators' expectations of these categories and proposes that his confounding of spectators' preconceptions is precisely the point. His work demands that spectators confront their own expectations, question their assumptions, and search for alternate perspectives to make sense of what they have experienced on stage. In 2013, I took a group of Lang students to the BAM Next Wave Festival to see Wilson's first full evening, not first, but his full evening work, Moses's. We were all exhilarated by what we saw and heard. The virtuosic dancing and singing, the swooping and at times feverish choreography, and more, the way the work's many influences, Wilson's travels to Israel, Egypt, Mali, and Turkey, fractal geometry, and Zora Neale Hurston's novel, Moses, Man of the Mountain, which retells the Moses story as a Southern folktale, the way all these influences and others combined in a rich patchwork of juxtapositioned elements that nevertheless respected the integrity of all the materials, including the incredible dancers and their dancing. For Wilson's work shows a deep respect for dancing and the body, for the stories and histories that live within the body, and for the new knowledge that can be produced by embodied practices. Wilson will be joining us again next semester as the Lang Dance Program's artist in residence. In that capacity, he'll be working with a group of students throughout the semester, creating a work for performance at New York Live Arts in May. We're so glad to have this opportunity to also have him with us tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Tonight there'll be after Reggie speaks, there'll be a Q&A. And then if you're here for a class and haven't signed in yet, please do so after the presentation. So those housekeeping tidbits taken care of, please help me welcome Reggie Wilson.
Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody. How are you? Y'all tired? Aw. Wait until you turn 50. So I usually don't know what I'm really going to say, which is why I'm really excited about this PowerPoint, or any PowerPoint. I have two now, and this is the first one that I did, and it helps keep me on track, I think. And trying to think, Neil covered a lot of stuff that I usually ramble on about at the beginning. I'm trying to think if there's some other stuff I want to throw in there. Well, why are you guys tired? I won't get to that, but why are you tired? You're like, how old? You're like 2. Why are you tired? What? That's exciting. And you're in New York. No. No, not at all. Well, unfold your arms. Anyway, stop, people that know me, stop laughing. I started off choreographing in middle school. And do you guys know what swing choir is? Show choir? Glee? The TV show Glee, everybody's like, yeah, okay, yeah. You can come on down if you want, yeah. Give them a round of applause. No. You don't know who they are. No, come all the way down. And don't let me forget to say something about the platform. That was in middle school. Swing choir, Glee. Like if you have no idea what swing choir, show choir is, it's exactly like Glee, except it was the '80s. And then I got into musical theater, started studying ballet, started studying jazz, and then between my junior and senior year in high school, I went to a summer camp at Northwestern University. They had a program called the Cherub program. Cricket, nobody? Y'all, okay, we can finish now if it's gonna be like this. If y'all tired, I'm tired, and then the rest of y'all. The cherub program, you know, like little cherubs, like it's cute, like little angels, and it's thank you. It's, but I got introduced to Martha Graham. How many of you guys have heard of Martha Graham before? And we were studying her, because the whole summer, because it was an arts camp, and it was theater and dance, and the whole summer was around Greek ritual. And if you know Graham, you know her, she did a lot of choreographies around Greek tragedy. She had Clytemnestra, Night Journey, I think there's one or two other ones that she had, but this idea that you could have so much drama without having to break into a song or like step aside and let somebody have a whole bunch of text and dialogue to explain while you're doing the thing was really fascinating to me. And so we did Pippin, we did West Side Story, we did Guys and Dolls, we did Godspell, and then I got into Graham, and then I decided I wanted to be a dancer, like for real, and I wanted to go to New York, and then I auditioned for NYU, and then I got into NYU, and then I went to NYU, and the people, you guys, have you heard of Juilliard? Yeah, so, just seeing if y'all alive. The guy who's the director of the dance, I forget what they call Larry, it's not dance chair, but he was, anyway, Larry Rhodes was the chair, and he brought in folks from Twyla Tharp, he brought in folks from Bill T. Jones, he brought in Mark Morris, he brought in David Gordon, he brought in a whole bunch of folks that were making work. It wasn't necessarily a conservatory kind of model where we did have classical modern and ballet technique, but it was a little bit funkier and weirder, and we were going to places like PS 122, we were going to DTW, which is now NYLA, we were going to Dance Space Project at St. Mark's Church, and we were going to the Joyce. The Joyce was new and weird, and I just got really excited. Have you also heard of Judson Dance Theater? So some of this is kind of, the dormitory I stayed in was Judson. Exactly. So that was weird, like my first coming to New York, being all like, okay, Graham and like Lamone and all this kind of stuff. I hadn't really started thinking about what postmodern dance was. And here I was living in Judson dorm. It's still, you know, the tower, the bell tower on, you guys live and play in the Village. So Washington Square Park on the south side, the church that's there, the tower. The third window up used to be my room. So that stuff Neil didn't tell y'all. I started having composition with a woman named Phyllis Lamhut. And in a weird, if you have to write a paper on this, you should be taking notes, but if not, don't worry about it. Her name was Phyllis Lamhut, and Phyllis was one of the early dancers with a guy named Alwyn Nikolai. And Alwyn Nikolai came from Hanya Home, and Hanya Home came from anybody? Mary Vigmon. No, we didn't lose the place yet. I'm just watching these faces because they really are tied, and I'm not helping. I'm just enjoying it. It's really just, I'm feeding off of it. Off of your misery. Yeah. what else did, so fisting, okay, get to the pictures and the points and the things. And so consciously and unconscious, there's a couple big things. Maybe I'll get to it. There have been two ongoing streams of thought, two ongoing theses in my work, consciously and unconsciously, and they are, and I should have a frame or a slide about it, but I don't. One version or one thought is, what is the relationship between Protestant Christianity and African diasporic religions? And the other, or the broader one, is what is the relationship between postmodern dance and African diasporic cultures and practices? And by postmodern, I tend to be really specific by thinking about Judson Dance Theater and the Grand Union. Judson Dance Theater and the Grand Union, and those folks that participated in that, some of whom we know and celebrate, and some of those who've disappeared into the haze and fog of time. So in that, there's 1,001 tangents, but kind of tongue-in-cheek and as a joke, I started calling my work Post-African Neo-HooDoo Modern Dance. And that's another point you can laugh. Post-African Neo-HooDoo Modern Dance. And I did that because basically the idea or the thought is, how are you gonna know what my work is about if I've got this postmodern things, and a lot of folks don't know that much, like the general public doesn't know that much about postmodern dance, right? The general public doesn't really know that much about African dance. And then here I am sticking them together. How are you supposed to know? So I just made it up in the sense that people hearing post-African Neo-HooDoo Modern Dance would say, well, what is this thing? I need to see it, or I can ignore it and I can just disappear and I can go about my business. And usually I'm pretty fine with either one of those. So in this PowerPoint presentation, we kind of created it to kind of unpack some of that information for viewers that hopefully will see the work, or dancers that might work with me, or audiences that might want to ignore me, or writers that might want to write about me, or scholars, so ... So you got the name, Reggie Wilson Fisting Performance Group, right? And the PowerPoint presentation is called, y'all say it together, let's get a little energy going. What is the PowerPoint called? Just read it. Okay, perfect, beautiful, that's the best. Right, gorgeous, exactly. Okay, so a really, really, really important thing that I started studying and finding out about was called, what was it called? The ring shout. And anybody know what a ring shout is? Nobody? Absolutely nobody, really? Can you guess what a ring shout is? I'm gonna point at somebody. Can you guess what a ring shout is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just guess. It's a ring. Exactly. It's a bunch of people in a circle shouting or singing. And it was actually a term that they used for an African practice that enslaved Africans as they converted to Christianity, sometimes forcibly, sometimes by their own choice, a way for them to kind of continue Africanist practices within a Christian context. And since you guys are such a loving group, you can also get my little joke there, the copyright, 1991, Reggie Wilson Fisting Performance Group. Just this idea that you can copyright culture is kind of ridiculous and silly. And so I like to pretend that in 1991 I copyrighted the ring shout, but that's not true. So I had really, 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 really wanted to go to Africa. And I didn't tell you that whole long story, which I'm not gonna go into now. But in order to go to Africa, I knew that I was gonna beg, borrow, steal, take things to incorporate into my own performance work. And I thought it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to think about possibly where my family came from and if there had been any African retentions or had anything from Africa kind of been passed on to me. And you kind of told them where I was born. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Y'all remember that, right? Yes. And originally my family, as far back as we can trace, this is another old joke for me because it keeps me happy, is my family, as far back as we can trace it to the mid to early 1800s, on my mother's side is actually from Moscow, Tennessee. Okay, a little bit, warming up a little bit. And on my father's side is actually from Grenada, because you were asking if I was from Trinidad. But it's actually Grenada, Mississippi. That's the second part of the joke. So as far back as we can trace it, my roots go back to the Mississippi Delta. And thinking about what could those Africanist practices would have been down in the Delta back in the 1800s. And doing some book research, started finding out and images, and there was this group called the McIntosh County Shouters, and trying to find out what a ring shout was. And as I had dance history with this woman, Camille Hardy, this idea of reconstructing dances, like we had to reconstruct pas de quatre and like these like old romantic ballets and things. And so we'd have to go to the dance collection because it was before the internet. You guys are all really, really young, right? Everybody here was born after the internet. Is that true? Except for all the folks down here. So this idea of reconstructing something. So I actually went back to Milwaukee to talk to folks in the church that I grew up in to find out all the songs that I used to sleep through, like why did they used to moan? Why did they used to always these long, what was that about? I wanted to understand where was this coming from, what were the words, what was the rhythms, what were all those little pieces of things that I used to ignore that actually were part of me, right? So got fascinated by the ring shout. And the ring shout, again, we said it's a circle dance where people are shouting or singing. It's this cultural practice that basically now we think of as the actual beginning of the Black church. Everybody's heard of the Black church, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of the Black church or seen a movie making fun of the Black church or anything with Eddie Murphy in it or Medea, right? So we're gonna reconstruct a ring shout. Mm-hmm. And you give me too many eyes, you're gonna be the first volunteer. But in a second. All right, so hold on, we're gonna go to the next. What do you call these things? Screens or slides? Oh, now they know things. Oh, after. All right, I see how y'all are. So call and response, right? Have you guys heard of call and response? If I call you, if I call you, if I call you, if I call you, if I call you. Exactly. So now that we've cracked that nut a little bit, is it okay if I teach you a song? Yeah? I want to teach you a song that I got from my mom and my aunt, and they got it from my grandfather, Granddaddy Fred. He taught him the song, but he didn't like him to sing the song because he said, if you sing the song, you'll go crazy. So everywhere I go, I like to teach the song. And so I sing, sea line, y'all sing, sea line woman, sea line. Know you lying, quit that low down, dirty line, milk in the pitcher, butter in that bowl, sea line, can't quit your sea line, say your soul, sea line in line, sea line in line, sea line in line, sea line in line. Sea line woman, call and response, right? So now we got our little shout. We're starting to get we're reconstructing here, right? We're researching, we're reconstructing. Next slide. Rhythm is the thing. in a lot of Africanist practices, regardless of whether there's drums, whether there's not drums, and this idea that white folks and Europeans had that they could take the drums away from the Africans because they were scared of this technology, that they were taking away the thing. They didn't realize rhythm was the thing, and the rhythm was inside of the people. They couldn't take that away. So this rhythm that we're going to add to our little shout, and it has a bunch of different names, but almost anywhere in the Western Hemisphere where Africans were brought to work, to be enslaved, you find a melding of this rhythm. Sometimes it's called an Abanara rhythm, sometimes it's called a skip rhythm, sometimes it's called nothing and they just clap, sometimes it's actually assumed and it's not articulated, like the words in the lyrics kind of like leave the gap for the rhythm. So uncross your arms and put your papers down for 2 seconds, maybe 5 minutes max. Nobody will be hurt. I promise I won't bite. Nobody paid me to bite you. Neil, right? There's no biting allowed. No biting allowed. Okay, so I'd like to use, is that too loud? No? Okay, so you're just gonna clap on that beat. Y'all, just clap. That's beautiful. It's actually beautiful after all that little tooth pulling that I had to do. Lovely. So don't speed up. Up. It's getting worse. It's plummeting. All right. So this beat, and you can tap your foot to it too if you want to. You don't have to, but it's kind of fun. And we're still speeding up, sorry. Exactly. This beat is really important, so if you are rhythmically challenged, don't be ashamed to just stay with this beat. If you're bored and you can't pay any attention, just stay with this beat. Now, if you want to have a little party, you want to liven it up a little bit, just this next rhythm, listen to it for a little while and then join in. The other clap, keep going. If you're rhythmically challenged, you can just keep clapping this. Yes, Lydia. Yes. Listen, just listen, just listen. And if you're just in between, keep going. We're gonna add on. Now, if you're really, really sophisticated, just a few of you are gonna also add on to that. Everybody has to keep clapping something. Don't just stop. Don't just stop. Oh my God. Is this on too? Don't just stop. Okay, let's just get this. Okay, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. These 2 rows, you're just gonna clap. Okay, and you guys back here, you're gonna clap. Watch my hand. And you people in the middle, you're gonna clap. And you got top. Keep that going. Sea lion, woman, sea lion, know you lion. Quit that low down, dirty lion. Milk in the pitcher, butter and bowl. Can't quit your sea lion to say a soul. Sea lion in line, sea lion in line, sea lion woman. All right. Ooh, that took a little bit of work, but we got there, right? Oh, yes, give yourselves a round of applause for clapping and singing. No, it was good. It was good. It was good. But, okay, so we got the call and response. We got the rhythm. We got our, which part of the ring shout? We got the shout, right? What we missing? What we missing though? The ring. So we finna build a ring. I need some volunteers. Thank you. So all the documents and the research I did, I was trying to find out. So at different points, different people went and observed some free persons of color doing ring shouts. They observed some enslaved people. They observed mixes. Then sometimes some white folks was getting in there shouting too. But there were basic elements that regardless of whether it was actually called a ring shout, whether it was derogatorily called fist and heel worshiping, whether it's called spiritual walking, whether it was called walking Jacob's ladder, had some basic elements, and those basic elements were, no, sorry, I shouldn't, I love picking on people. Are you okay? Okay. That there were basers, what they call folks that would just base, and sometimes they would use a broomstick on a floor just to pound out the rhythm. And then there were the shouters that would be clapping the rhythm and singing and shouting the song. And then you had another set of shouters that actually made the ring, and people would join in and pull out and join in and pull out of the actual ring shout. So typically the shout, you know where we're going next, the ring shout traveled, locomoted through space, in a counterclockwise direction. Now, which way is counterclockwise? Let's have everybody face in a clock so that you could da 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 dum da 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 da. Are they correct? Is that a counterclockwise? And just walk in this direction. Is this counterclockwise? Yeah. So basically, okay, good. Thank you. You can stop. The weird thing is, and nobody really knows why, a lot of African circle dances locomote in this counterclockwise direction. I started hearing some things, but I can't really remember exactly why. Another important element of the ring shout is that they locomoted through space, or that they traveled in the counterclockwise direction using a shuffling, hitching motion. So if you were reconstructing a ring shout and you had never seen a ring shout, and the only thing you had were these words of a shuffling, hitching motion, what might be some of the steps you come up with? That's not bad. That's okay. That's a flap. That's a time step. That's the wop. Just shuffling with a shuffle, that's gliding. That's a shuffle and a flap, but it's not that shuffling. It's actually a lot subtler. And because the practitioners of the ring shout did not believe that they were dancing, this was a religious activity, they did not allow themselves to cross their feet. And so the shuffling, hitching motion was basically just, but it wasn't about traveling so much in the space, all right? It was just to kind of agitate and get the rhythm. So can we go back? Okay, no, what else we gotta add? We gotta add. So, anybody know anything about Africa? Anybody ever heard of Africa? Anybody ever heard of African dance? All right. In Central Africa, if you're going through your files in your brain, if you know anything about dance, know anything about African dance, if you're thinking about dance from Central Africa, which part of the body is more active? The what? The waist, the hips. The hips are very active, sometimes extremely quick and fast, and sometimes it's just a little hitch in it. And so the shuffling and the hitch might come from a little bit of pelvic movement. And because this was a religious activity, some folks watching it thought, oh, these poor stupid Africans, they can't even they already up and they shout and they should be sitting and praying. Don't they know how to sit quietly? And you know you're supposed to kneel and you're supposed to sit and you're supposed to stand and you're supposed to kneel and you're supposed to sit. They're already clapping, they're worshiping with their fists and their heels. And then these licentious women got their hands on their hips and they letting their backbone slip just a little bit. So, ladies, you're going to keep your hands on your hips. Gentlemen, you're going to have your hands like in your lower back, kind of, and you're just going to have a little bit of action. So if we can just get that beat back. Okay, so we're going to build the ring, and we're going to be done with this little part of, okay, hold on. So we're going to build like a whole, he redid his hair. I know, that's good though. I like the variety. I'm a little jealous. We're going to build the whole atmosphere of a shout. So shouts could go anywhere from like 3 hours to all night long. And so they typically would start and stop, but they would also start off very much just about kind of walking. Normally, people would actually just be seated at a prayer service. Somebody might get up and preach and say some words. They would move the benches back, and then people would start to kind of mark the circle and walk. So when we start and we're clapping pretty slow, you guys are just going to walk, almost on the beat, not really on the beat, but as it starts to pick up, you're going to start shuffling and turning it into a shout, and we're going to pick up the speed. Yeah? So you can be walking or you can be standing, or somebody might pass you, and then once it starts. So we're just going to start with our clap. Don't get too fast. Let's start off real slow. And then the other clap. Say line, woman. No, you line. Y'all could still be walking. No, you line. Quit that low down, dirty line. Milk in the pitcher, butter in that bowl. Can't quit your seed line to say it's so. Still line in line, still line in line. A little bit faster, a little bit faster. Say line, woman, no you line. Quit that low down, dirty line. Milk in the pitcher, butter and bowl. Can't quit your sea line to say it's so. Hey, sea line, come on a little faster. Hey, a little faster. Hey, sea line, woman. Wiggle, you don't have to travel too fast, oh, you line. Quit that low down, dirty line. Milk in the pitcher, butter and bowl. Can't quit the sea line to say your soul. Last gear, a little bit faster. Say line, woman, no you lie. Quit your low down, dirty line. All right. All right, thank you very much. Give them a round of applause. Y'all want a piece of candy for your shouting? Who shouted? One of you three. Who shouted over here? Somebody over here shouted. Did you shout? Oh, but she's like, I want some candy. Nobody? All right. I need some water, so give yourselves applause for taking candy. All right. So that's basically a ring shout. Reconstructing that really, really dramatically shifted my thinking about what I had been fed about what slaves did and how they were. I thought of slaves as singing songs, go down, Moses, we down, just heavy and sad all the time. And when I started realizing some of those songs actually had rhythm behind it, had energy behind it, had healing behind it, it started transforming my thinking, transforming my perception of how much agency these slaves, these enslaved Africans actually had over their lives. What were they actually able to hold on to? It just was like a click, and I was just like, oh wait, they were people. They had agency. Does your body feel a little bit different than when you came in the room, even though you're tired, even though you're kind of like this? Just the sense of being able to do something as simple as clap your hand and tap your foot and respond, even though you may know the song, may not know the song, gives you a little bit of life and sustenance. That drastically shifted. The second thing that shifted was also this idea for me that I'd also been fed that the Negro spiritual, I started thinking of it like, what's her name? Leontine Price and what's the other one? There's another one. There was a big black opera singer. But opera singers love singing Negro spirituals. And it usually sounds like, go down, Moses. And it's just like, okay, I know that song, but that's not how it sounded in the church that I grew up in. The church I grew up in, some mother might get up when she's testifying and go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Yes, tell who? Tell who? Pharaoh to what? Let my people go. It was conversational. It had timbre. It was a wall of sound. It was doing something. It wasn't just ornamentation. It wasn't just about sounding pretty. That was another shift of actually going back and not just taking what was fed to me, going back and taking some research. So we need to move on a little bit quickly. So if we can all read this together, I think this is funny. This is from Traveling On by Michael Sobel. And this is the quote of which Neil was referring to that I actually found the quote, Fist and Hill Worshiping. So can we read it together? So the whites were not the only ones appalled by black frenzy. African Methodist Bishop Daniel Payne attended a black bush meeting where there was a prayer and singing band. He objected to the activity and forcibly tried to stop their fist and heel worshiping. After the sermon, they formed a ring, which we did, right? And with coats off, people had their coats off. We sung, we clapped our hands, we stomped their feet in the most ridiculous and heathen. Now, we were slightly ridiculous and heathenish. We could have been a little bit more, right? We could have been more heathenish and ridiculous. Okay, going on. The group was very sullen when Payne demanded they desist. I'm Payne, I made y'all desist. Payne later talked to the leader of the ring and insisted that the Spirit of God works upon people in different ways. At camp meeting, there must be a ring here. We only had one ring, but we could have had another ring there, and another ring there, and a ring over yonder, or sinners will not get converted. So this idea, for me, the ring shouts brought me into thinking about African practices as African technology and how some of that technology was practiced in the United States, in the Americas as well. So for me, the shout served as a research subject. It also helped me to start understanding and think about the difference between trance and possession. This idea that Africanist religious practices are often about communication with spirits. So trance is this idea where you have the rhythm, you have this idea, and you move yourself, or the community moves you into a state of a trance, and you go away to go visit the ancestors or the spirit or the prophets or whoever, and you talk to them and you find out, well, so-and-so stole so-and-so's purse. Who was it? And, well, I saw them and there was this person. So you go back, and then you come back and you can tell the congregation, well, you know who stole the purse? Spirit told me. Other way, possession is this idea where we make noise, we make rhythm, we do all these things, and then the spirit, the ancestors, the prophet, whoever it is, comes from there, comes into a selected vessel, a prepared vessel, an individual, and then that spirit is able to actually tell you who stole the purse. So you don't have to travel to the spirit travels to. So those two kind of differences exist. And also that the ring shout is this idea of the beginning of the Black church. Moving forward, this idea again of what is African dance? A lot of people kind of know, but a lot of folks don't really know. And I don't have, what is it, a slide, a screen, a frame, a slide. Y'all learning stuff, I'm gonna learn something too. In this, I don't have a slide that talks about, some folks feel that I've gone and spent so much time researching African diasporic culture, and especially going to Africa because I'm looking for my roots. I know my roots. My roots are in the Mississippi Delta. There is a genius in African dance, and I'm fascinated by that. And I keep getting fascinated about what are those systems, how do those systems work, how does that technology thought about, what are the frameworks, and are there any parallels or are there any devices that I can actually bring back to my contemporary performance? So anyway, this idea about what is African dance, and so I kind of put this quick little slide thing together for you so you can start seeing just some differences. So thinking about what, I want you to not think about, oh, what does it mean? But think about what are these people doing when they're dancing? What are these people doing when they're dancing? I mean, how do I make this? It's somewhere there, isn't it?
The Kung believe that the songs are given by the great God, and that they have medicine, Ngum, a mystical potency capable of curing, dangerous if too strong. Ngum exists in the music and the dance fire, but the most important deposit is in the medicine men, who are called Ngumkausi, or owners of medicine. Among the Kung, almost all men become medicine men and practice it sometime in their lives.
So there's a couple things with this video that I want you to think about and know. But the first thing I want you to yell out or talk or share is, what did you see them doing? Like, what was going on? Describing just physically. There were some individuals in the middle, and they were actually low, and then there were other people kind of single file following behind each other. Circular, but not necessarily the same counterclockwise circular, right? What else was going on? There was touching and holding people to kind of guide them and help them. So there was it two hands? Were they touching people like this, or? It was holding. I was actually holding somebody. What else was going on? Sorry? Were there hands on the hips? They weren't. There were no hands on the hips. What else? Some from this little group over here. Just yell out anything you thought you saw. There was shuffling. Not so much hitching, but a lot of shuffling, right? Their feet were pretty close together, and it was a sandy, gravelly bottom, and their feet were just kind of like paving a way through that. Anything else that we saw? Was there hip movements? Was there head movements? Shh, Retta, you're from the company. Any other observations, just quickly? Heads were pretty much down in focus, and the focus was internal also. This dance is actually from the Khoisan people in the Kalahari Desert. It's actually some of the first ethnographic footage I encountered when I was studying ethnography and anthropology and that kind of, and filmic ethnographic stuff back at NYU. And it's by the Marshall family. The Marshalls stayed with the Hmong people in the Kalahari for a couple or few generations to kind of also see how technology was changing, how lifestyles were changing, how healing rituals. This is a healing ritual called Hum. Hum is an internal power, and the narrator was starting to talk about that. This is a dance from Southern Africa that's a religious dance. That's one frame of an African dance, right? Doesn't tell you about all African dance. It's a specific type of African dance. Now we're gonna jump to West Africa. West Africa. And we're gonna see a dance called Sabar. And this is a performance group. I can't see the thing again. yeah? What did you see? Quick, quick, quick. A lot of legs, just legs? A lot of arms, jumping. A lot of energy. Leg kind of tapped out, tapped in. So a lot of foot activity, crossing, uncrossing is kind of what you're talking about, right? Or what do you mean tap out, tap in? You mean like one person is going in, the next person comes in. Thank you. Yes. There was a relationship between the dancing and the drums. The other clip I showed you, there were no drums. The rhythm was coming from the voice and from the clapping. Did you hear a lot of singing? There's a lot of drumming, and it was more than one drum. So there are a lot of cross rhythms, and the dancing is kind of happening on top of that. Anything else we saw? That's a lot. This group is not, this is not a religious activity at this point. This dance started out as a religious activity. It's no longer. This is a dance, this was a performance group. This was a courtyard. They're actually dancing on concrete. Different part of Africa, different dance, different part of the body. The body is being organized and utilized in a completely different way. Jumping again, now we're gonna jump to Central Africa, to Cameroon to see a dance called Asiko. What did we see? A lot of hips, a lot of footwork, somebody else, shoulders. Lots of different types of instruments, a lot of drums. Was it drums? Yeah, I'm pointing at you. It was just drums? What else was it? There was a guitar, electric guitar, anything else? The body was pretty stationary. The torso was pretty stationary. Were the arms doing anything? They were kind of held in a position. It wasn't this position. It was kind of like to bring attention to what the pelvis was doing. Were the feet stationary? What were the feet doing? Come on, people, talk to me so we can get through this. Wake up. Wake up! Besides these three ladies, what else? What were the feet doing? They were pivoting, turning, there was a lot of different footwork, right? Hips doing one thing, feet doing something else, arms pretty stationary. Somebody said some shoulder things. There was group formations. I think if you watch the whole kind of thing, the formations kind of change. I think there might be some tapping out, tapping in, what did you call it? Tap outs. Different use and construction of the body in space and time. This is why I get fascinated by Africa, because every time I go to a different part, different region, different village, I find out a different body part has, because I studied kinesiology, I studied ballet, I studied Graham, I studied Limon, I studied Luigi, I studied all these, anatomy, how the body should, Maggie Black don't shift, or somebody else shift, all these things, and then you go and you see somebody, it's just like, I didn't learn how to make my spine do that. Becomes fascinating. Jumping to, we've talked a little bit about Africa to start unpacking that, to unpack a little bit of postmodern dance. This was one of the first dances, postmodern dances I saw, and it was back when I was in Milwaukee, and it was on Great Performances. And it's by this woman who is not officially, I believe, part of postmodernism, but we still pack her in there as one of the postmoderns, Laura Dean. Okay, what do we see? Is this on? What do we see? What do we see? What do we see? A lot of circles, twirling, cannon, arms. What kind of arms? Flailing, were they flailing or spread out, moving away from the body? Anything else that we saw? Formation, there was a circle, there was a spinning, so there was a circle or a wheel inside a wheel inside a wheel. Anything else, anything else? They went one at a time, so that's the canon idea. Does this dance remind anybody of anything, any cultural form? The whirling dervishes. And as far as I understand this, is that Laura Dean swears up, down, and center, she might have changed her position, that she had no influence from the whirling dervishes. I don't believe it. So this idea also of cultural appropriation, I won't go deeply into that. We're going to jump to another postmodern by Grace, Twyla Tharp. And this piece that was a really big deal for us back in the 80s. The golden section from The Catherine Wheel. The Catherine Wheel, I think, was actually on Broadway. It was a big TV production. It was on PBS again. I think I might have seen this before I came to New York, too. But Twyla was doing some things that Twyla owned her stuff. She said she was working with African-American cool, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. This changed how we started seeing what the body could do in space and time as far as postmodern dance. Come on, and go. Exciting, right? In a weird, almost 70s, but really 80s kind of way. What do we see? Partnering. This is the first time we've really seen partnering going on. What else? Flipping, formations. What kind of formations? A lot, or was it one type? Because in the Laura Dean, we saw a circular formation. What kind of formations did we see here? Multiple people differently. It almost was like there were multiple places you could look at the same time, right? What else? You're saying something? What else did we see? What else? This weird contradiction of like the energy was kind of consistent. There was always action, but it was always different types of action. Sometimes unison, sometimes solo work, but layered over each other. What else did we see? Huh? Running. We just saw people running. What else did we see? Skipping. Like these pedestrian activities. We also saw some people kind of grooving, not so well sometimes. What else did we see? Anybody recognize the music? It's this guy named David Byrne from the Talking Heads. Anybody kind of remember who that is? So this is a really, really, really different type of idea. This idea that cool was something to play with choreographically, this idea that pedestrian movements were something to play with again. These are ideas that kind of embedded in postmodern dance, in Yvonne Rainer's No Manifesto. No to technique, no to, even though Twyla slipped some technique back in there, you can see some lines, you can see some straight legs, you can see all these things kind of hitting up against each other and getting mixed into, so it's not just pure dance, it's not high dance, it's not low dance, it's all coming together in different ways. All of that to say, all of this stuff I've been talking about to kind of get you prepped, maybe overly prepped, to see post-African Neo-HooDoo Modern dance. So this is Moses. This is one of the pieces that Neil talked about that we did at BAM. This is a revisioning of Moses's for a chapel on Governor's Island at St. Cornelius' Chapel. And this is the last slide. Did I finally get it? Wow, y'all some good
come across. There you there and the host got love. Hey, fear not host got. Hey, fear not host got. Hey, fear not host got. Well, Moses, don't get lost. But you're right, come on, boy. Well, fear and the host got lost. Hey, you fear not host got. In the red sea, well, Moses, Pharaoh, come in. Hide you head and horse and friend. Yeah, you Moses, don't get lost. But that rod, come on, boy. Well, Moses, don't get lost. But that rod, come on, boy. Yeah, Moses, don't get lost. But that rod, come on, boy. Well, Pharaoh and the host got lost. Hey, Pharaoh and the host got in that Red Sea. Well, Pharaoh and the host got. Hey, Pharaoh and the host got. Well,
So that's a little snippet of how, at least in my head, some of all those different types of ideas start to interrelate to each other to create something that is a little bit the same, a little bit the past, something that's a little bit new, but something also that's kind of right here and right now. In closing, that's it. Questions? Okay, thank you. No. There's a bunch of things I didn't kind of go into, so if we wanted to take maybe 2 minutes, 5 minutes, if anybody wanted me to kind of clarify anything, or maybe expand a little bit longer on some question. Anybody that choreographs or actually dances? One question? No question? There's one question in the back. There's 2 questions at least, and maybe we'll stop there. Yeah. Oh, we need the mics up here. They're videotaping. They want to capture your beautiful, stunning, straight back.
I'm just curious if you've been intrigued by like North African dance also.
Yes.
So like what your research in regards to that?
I spent a bit of time in Morocco, and also to me kind of still Chad, which is still kind of the Sahel starts coming up as kind of like borderline, but specifically in Morocco and also in Egypt. And thinking about Zar, which is this women's spiritual kind of practice, and thinking about that for Moses as I researched some of that. And at one point in my career, because I'm not a scholar, I'm a choreographer, and I love claiming that in the sense that I can research things deeply, but it's still my piece, and I can make choices and hopefully make respectful choices, but choices out of what I want to do. And so at one point, though, I did have this theory that the dances in Africa followed the body. So like North African dances were like head and shoulders, and then we went a little bit further down and there were limbs, and you go to Central Africa and it's all hips, and then like you go to Southern Africa and it's all stomping and then you go to like in any of those points of the body, a village or a place or a whole country, and they're doing all the things or they're using the opposite. I began focusing more in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa. 2002, 2003, I started exploring Senegal and Ghana, more West Africa. After that, I went to Central Africa, and then I was able to do a little bit more in North and East. But also, I've been fascinated by Bharatanatyam. Spent time and still fascinated by the Yupik dance in Alaska. So besides all the formal technical Western dance forms that I've studied at NYU and before and kind of thing. So to me, movement is movement. And I like seeing how what is this one? It's, not why do people dance, but what are people doing when they dance? and what's their thinking and how are they using the body in ways to communicate. Is it for sport? Is it for meditation? Is it for relaxation? Like the ring shout was not considered a dance by the practitioners. That becomes fascinating to me. And it becomes fascinating to me thinking about how we talk about contemporary performance and what is dance, what isn't dance. Yeah. There was a question. Okay. Yeah.
I actually have two quick questions. So the first is about Sea Line.
Uh-huh.
Now, is Nina Simone the originator, or she okay.
It's a folk song.
Okay.
It's a folk song, and I remember, because right after I graduated from NYU, I was doing housekeeping to make money because I didn't want to wait tables. And this guy had like a lot of CDs, and I had just started like learning this song that I got from my mother and my aunt, and they got it from Granddaddy Fred, and he got it from, and he didn't like it. And then I'm going through his CDs, put the CD, I was like, oh, I've always heard about Nina Simone, and ooh, I was like, what? But the rhythm that they use was slightly back to front for how I'd heard it. And the verses that I sang mostly today those were directly from my family, not from Cena. But if you hear Zora Neale Hurston talk in her stories just about how those songs, the lyrics changed and people played with them. So, second quick question?
Yeah, the second quick question is, have you obtained any of these clips, or have you thought about obtaining clips from the Caribbean, right? Let's say Latin America and the Caribbean, let's say like Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad, Tobago, these countries where there are African or former enslaved people that still inhabit these regions that have their own rhythm and their own dancing styles. I think that, because I came here kind of late, so I don't know if you said that at the beginning.
No, that's the next PowerPoint presentation.
Awesome. Okay.
No, I spent a lot of, so I kind of gave you the Africa part of it, and this is focused on thinking about African and postmodern dance, but it actually is Africanist. And I started off going back to Milwaukee, where I was from. Then I went down south to where my family was from, to the actual towns and hamlets that they were from. I went down to New Orleans, and then I was searching for more and more and more about like what could those things really have looked like. And then because Retta, who's worked with me for a long time from Trinidad and Tobago, and I knew a lot of other dancers that were contemporary dancers and modern dancers that were from Trinidad. So I went to a lecture and I started hearing about the Orisha worship in Trinidad and Tobago. And then my question again, what is Protestant Christianity and the relation of African dances? So I asked the question because I'd read a lot about Catholicism. I was like, but what did the Protestants do? Protestants had all the Africa just like ripped off of us. And this woman, Cheryl Byron, who, Something Positive, she's late now, but what's his name? Michael Manswell still has the company. Cheryl said, oh, well, there's the Shouter Baptists or the Spiritual Baptists. And she said, I was like, well, what do they do? She said, they have this breathing that they do. I was like, well, what breathing? She's like, so did I go to Caribbean? Do I pass? No, I'm kidding. So I spent a lot of time doing field research with the Spiritual Baptists from Trinidad and Tobago, which is also in the Lesser Antilles, so Grenada, Barbados. A little bit less Jamaica, but there's a number of Jamaicans that have been in my company. Recently, we just went to Panama, went to Haiti, went to Dominican Republic. And it's infinite. There was another question. Last questions. Y'all can start leaving if you want to get out of here. I know, I saw his hand.
Can you, is this on? Is it on? Can you say a few words in your last piece about your use of music specifically? Obviously, this is a composer's question here. How you approach music, the drumming, but especially the singing, how that relates to your dance?
Ooh, I have no idea. It's the shout and I want to say inseparability of the music and the dance in a lot of Africanist practices, but coming as a postmodern, contemporary, experimental, avant-garde, whatever kind of tag you want to put on it. Excuse me, I often work on with the music separately, regardless of whether it's us shouting, whether it's pre-recorded music, and whether it's house music or stepping, or whether it's music that's our music from Egypt, it's from Nubia. They're all equal kind of like fodder for me to kind of play with. So sometimes it's because I'm trying to evoke place. It's rarely because I'm trying to evoke character, but sometimes memory or emotion, and to see how those things weave over each other. So it's a little Cage Cunningham in that it's a little bit in the process of just like, well, what's randomly available? I mean, Retta will testify to that we learn a set of songs that have, and then I might arrange them, if it's like a Nina Simone, if it's a C-line, if it's Moses, Don't Get Lost, or some of these other rhythms. Or sometimes we study some songs from Zimbabwe, so some of those rhythms, and they have little holes in them. That, and to think, oh, that gap, because a lot of times, at least in New York and in America, we think of African music as West African music, where there are these large drum orchestras and polyrhythms going over and over and over. They're somehow simplified a lot of times in Southern Africa, but they're still as complex, and then the vocal work on top of that. That's some of my thinking about how that interacts. It's found material for me to try and understand somewhat where it came from, to try and not be offensive in how I use it, but then to put it all on an equal platform to be played around with. Yes. I was given for you, but yes. Mike.
Where did you go in the Dominican Republic?
Oh, where did we go in the Dominican Republic? We were not there for super long. We were in Santiago. And in, come on, what's the capital? Santo Domingo.
Like studying rituals of?
The project we were there with was with the State Department. And it was a very controlled exchange. It was their idea is diplomacy through dance. So we worked with a number of performance groups. I kept pushing to find out more about the carnival activities and the traditions, and their things now, because of what I know about Trinidad, what I know about Haiti. I know more about Haiti. It's like seeing the links between some of how the parallels, but also seeing the difference between whether it was formerly a Spanish colony, a French colony, a Dutch colony, an English colony, whether the Americans came in at some time and whether they didn't, and whether people had a revolution and then went to New Orleans, or whether they went to Miami, whether there was a flotilla. All of those things are really, really fascinating to me. So it's a layered ongoing. And to me, again, the African diaspora is like my gateway to the world, right? So, yeah.
Hi, Reggie.
Hi.
Hi. So, I don't mean this to be impertinent, but it's off. It's why. It's the why question. It's why we know what we've heard a lot about, really interesting things about what you do and what questions you're involved in. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the answer. But like, why are you presenting this work? And I ask this of almost everybody.
I mean, I'm making the work because I've been a choreographer since I was small. And I feel like that's part of my identity. As a young dancer, I had a major knee injury, so I stopped being a dancer. For a very prominent choreographer, he who shall not be named, Ohad Naharan, before he went to Israel. And it's just what I do. Choreographing, and when I think about choreographing, it's not necessarily how everybody thinks about choreographing. For me, choreographing is about organizing. I think I also got addicted to telling people what to do. because as an 8th grader, I was asked to be the assistant choreographer for the high school musical. So as an 8th grader telling seniors, no, you have to stand here, possibly very addictive. So being able to organize time and space and get bodies, and then choreography is a way that if I'm obsessed, I talk about not being inspired, but I talk about being obsessed. And if I'm obsessed with something and it keeps like coming at me, usually the best way for me to think it through is to make a dance about it. There was something over here. Should we stop? Yes, that's the last question.
Okay, so you touched on earlier about black dance. Oh wait, actually Neil said that. But I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. But what would you say is maybe the difference between capital BD black dance and then post-African neo-HooDoo modern postmodern dance?
All right. I mean, there's a couple of ways I can answer that, but that mostly goes into my little sociological, anthropological head. Little bit linguistic about how are we using those terms? Because even which is why I came up with post-African neo-HooDoo modern dance, is because these words, what are they actually telling you about the dance? So in dance, we've been a little bit lazy theoretically, so the categories, so after the postmodern period, so we still, in New York, we used postmodern, still to this day, we used it for a long time, and contemporary dance was something that they did in Europe, but now we call it contemporary dance, we also call it postmodern, we call it avant-garde, we call it downtown. So to me, it's a little bit of almost the same thing about black dance. I know a lot of times folks have framed big B, big D, black dance as meaning more modern dance-based, more Ailey, Philadanco, Dallas Black Dance, Cleo Parker Robinson. There's a couple other that are kind of large rep companies. I think in New York, I'm sure other places, but definitely in New York, there were a number of choreographers who were working with some of the same experiments that a lot of the Judson Dance Theater, and they were either there or they were coming around like Bill T. Jones, like Ralph Lemon, B.B. Miller, Ronald K. Brown, who else? Garth Fagan. Garth is one of those almost in-betweeny because he was not in New York. He's in New York State. David Rousseff. I'm thinking of, what's her name? She ended up doing Rent. Marlise Yerby. Jawale with Urban Bushwomen, Jawale Joe Zoller. So there was a lot of folks doing what they want to do and not ignoring the fact that they were black. And so for me, black dance, I'm black and I'm making dance, so it's a black dance. For some other folks, maybe more so, maybe less so. I mean, I've also been challenged that some folks knowing my work for a long time would be like, oh, when did you start making black dance? I was just like, from the first piece of dance I did at NYU to Grace Jones, it's always had a predominantly black dancers. There have been white folks, Asians, Latinas, Latinos in the group, in the mix. But the content, the rhythm, the story, the image, the thought has come out of a black worldview. It's come about exploring that. But to me, it's the same way that, to me, the question is less about that and more about, well, what is white dance? You know, I mean, I don't know how often you get challenged and questioned about your whiteness. Sarah Mitchelson, John Jaspers, the question of like, how much is your dance like Lar Lubavitch, or like how much is your dance like Paul Taylor, how much is your dance like these iconic, it doesn't come up in the same kind of way. So that is a little bit more my response about that. I have no problem being black, but I also enjoy rhythms and thinking about, I grew up also in a very integrated school. I got tracked really early, and there were rich, poor, black, white, Jews, Catholics, we grew up and our parents knew and people dated and did all kinds of things. So it's a weird question for me, and it comes up and it's come up. And like when I first came to New York, there was a big conversation about that and a big separation about it. And sometimes it was about access to funds and money. Sometimes it was about access to validity. And it was sometimes thinking about whether you are black enough. And it was just like, well, am I black enough if the content, but the structure isn't what you think black people are supposed to be doing? And what is black structure? And for me, I've actually started calling myself now an African formalist and thinking about African fractals and fractal symmetry and learning about the history of fractal symmetry and how it's been embedded in African culture for so long. But technology only started really with Mandelbrot, only started bringing it into Western Euclidean mathematics only in the 60s and 70s. That just starts to just like, oh, these histories kind of match up in a number of different ways. So I ignore it at the same time that I just want to make the dance that I want to make. And on that note, there's two things. If people, because you're students and you're poor, but if you want to buy a CD to support the company, you're welcome to. This is some shouting stuff. And then if you want some peppermint candy. Huh? The CDs are $20 donation. Candy's free. Oh, and then I was just reminded to let folks know in March of 2018, I'm also, besides being here to set a piece on the students, I'm going to be working on a platform at Dance Space Project at St. Mark's Church. And the title of it, and now I have my head's in a different place, but it's called Dancing Platform Praying Grounds, Blackness, Churches, and Downtown Dance. So that conversation that you just asked me about is continuing not just about me and my dance, but it's with a range of choreographers that are downtown, thinking about the history of the church, thinking about the history of downtownness, thinking about the history of race in downtown dance. So bye, y'all. Thank you.